Alternative music reached a pivotal juncture in 1994. The four rock acts that dominated the first half of the 20th century's last decade all came out with popular new material. Nirvana, Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, and Soundgarden would go on to sell over 30 million units combined from work released that year. It turned out to be the only time the Mount Rushmore of grunge gods all unfurled original albums during the same calendar flip-through. Of course, that feat would no longer be possible after Kurt Cobain tragically took his life in April of 1994. Alt-addicted adolescents were distraught following the death of a man who encapsulated their frustration through music. After the tears were wiped away and the eulogies were put down, it became clear rock music needed a facelift. The downtrodden feel of the Seattle scene had become all too real. There needed to be a blast of color to brighten the dreary, cloudy sky that had become mainstream rock. Where would this refreshing wave come from? Billy Corgan and the rest of the Pumpkins were in between their two biggest records. The Gallagher brothers would come out with their seminal effort the next year. Weezer and Nine Inch Nails put out respectable compilations, but would not reach phenomenon status. The Offspring would have a banner year with their defining record, Smash. Unfortunately for them, it was not as massive as the album three Bay Area guys would title Dookie. That threesome, known as Green Day, had been bumming around the Berkeley music scene for years. At the head of the three-piece is frontman, guitar pounder, and songwriter Billy Joe Armstrong. The creative force behind the band produced lyrics wrapped in a web of anxiety, apathy, and individuality. Along with his trusty Fernandez Stratocaster, he affectionately named Blue, Armstrong's downstroking style is straight out of Johnny Ramones' playbook. Contributing to Green Day's rhythm section is Armstrong's childhood friend, Michael Ryan Pritchard, who goes by Mike Dirnt. The bassist's catchy thumping adds a needed musical depth to the band's sound. Dirnt has to make his presence felt on each track to take some of the musical pressure off of Armstrong, especially when the group is on stage. Behind the kit on Green Day's initial studio work was John Kiffmeyer, also known as Al Sobrante. He was in charge of banging away on the drums for the band's early material, including the group's first album, 1039 Smoothed Out Slappy Hours, which was a compilation of work they had pulled from EPs and the songs from 39 Smooth. You can hear the raw, uncompromised sound and idea the band was going for in their first studio effort, which was released under independent label Lookout Records. Armstrong was already showing off his effective writing style, combining love, or at least lust, with anxiety in such songs such as At the Library, Judge's Daughter, and Paper Lanterns. But also, the powerful eruptions, like on Going to Passaquala, showed their sense of musical tenacity as well. In 1990, Kiffmeyer went off to college, leaving the band without a drummer until the group discovered Frank Edwin Wright III. No, seriously, that is his real name. The man better known as Trey Cool rounded out the rambunctious trio. He made his name by being able to drive a formidable, steady beat, while being a bit of a wild card. His goofy persona aside, behind the kit, he is a surgical technician responsible for keeping the heartbeat of Green Day pumping. Now with the lineup fully solidified, Green Day got to work in the studio and created Kerplunk, which Lookout started distributing in late 1991. On this record, you can hear the chemistry between the three percolating. Armstrong is tapping into his romantic side on 2,000 Light Years Away, his struggle with nerves on Who Wrote Holden Caulfield, and a touching tribute to a bygone era on Christie Road. Dirt's thick thumps and Cool's pounding fills complete the awesome album. With the popularity of alternative and grunge bands coursing through the first half of the decade, music executives were on the lookout for the next big thing to ascend from the underground. Due to the success Green Day was gaining in the Bay, including getting time at the legendary 924 Gilman Street, major labels were itching to sign the band. I just felt like we were a wrecking ball that was ready to just destroy the house that grunge built. Armstrong once admitted in an interview. We're just very ambitious people. I'll be the first to admit that. You can hang me for that. The first two Green Day records sold over 50,000 copies, despite the distribution range being as far as they could drive their van. They were packing clubs tighter than the rooms permitted. While the band wanted to stay true to their punk roots, they were outgrowing Lookout's capabilities. And despite the horror stories of other punk bands failing to make a splash after moving to a major label, Green Day was running out of options. The trio was stuck in the middle of three choices: keep producing music on Lookout, who was unable to keep up with their demand; give up on this music dream and go back home to try and support themselves another way; or make the jump to the big time. Our band was like a foot that was growing too many toes, Dirt once said in an interview. Trying to jam our foot into that same size sneaker wasn't going to happen anymore. Green Day chose to do what many successful people throughout history have done. They bet on themselves. In April of 1993, Warner Brothers won the bidding war and inked the Berkeley Group. Thanks in part to Rob Cavallo's pitch, who had assisted producing the band's first major label recording, Green Day was ready to unleash their sound under the backing of Reprise Records. They wanted to harness their live energy on an album and share it with the world. What followed was one of the most important albums of the 90s, and the record that finally launched punk rock out from the underground doldrums and into the bright lights of mainstream music. Hello, I am Chad Jones, and welcome to Don't Scratch the Vinyl, a music podcast where myself, and occasionally a guest, break down an iconic album in its entirety. This show both lays out the historical significance of the record and what music fans can take from the compilation today. I'm recording this episode at Big Night Media's studio in Boston, Massachusetts. If I was forced to pick one band to listen to for the rest of my life, I would choose Green Day. This love affair began at a very young age, when my mother bought the American Idiot CD in the fall of 2004. I had not yet turned 7 when I was exposed to lines like the subliminal mindfuck America. Sometimes growing up, it was really cool having older brothers. My little 6-year-old self had not yet moved on from enjoying the finer things in life, the Tarzan soundtrack and banging plastic swords into bushes. But then I was introduced to that unbelievable opening guitar riff of da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na-na. The music had me gobsmacked. What is this? Is he allowed to say words like that? I did not understand the idea of punk rock music, let alone the geopolitical and adult themes Armstrong was shouting out in that record. I just knew I had never heard anything like that before, and I wanted more. From then on, I remember Green Day being a fixture in my life. In addition to American Idiot, especially the title track, Jesus of Suburbia, Holiday, Boulevard of Broken Dreams, and Wake Me Up When September Ends, I quickly became aware of many Green Day classics. Brain Stew and Jaded, Good Riddance, Minority, their rendition of I Fought the Law, and of course, the massive hits from Dookie were seeping into my DNA. I would guess I have consumed Basket Case and Welcome to Paradise as often and as frequently as any two songs in my life. Well, those two are definitely including in this group of When I Come Around and She, as far as coming along for my ride through adolescence. My appreciation for Green Day's different eras never really wavered. And I recall greatly revoking that flame at the end of high school and early in college. That is when I first started to really dive into Dookie start to finish and soak in every track, not just the hits. And I loved it. I would routinely pop in the CD and play the first few songs, or skip around the order when driving to college or swim coaching. I have had the pleasure of seeing them in concert 5 times, including twice in 2024, to appreciate Dookie and American Idiot all the way through live. It was special hearing the tracks they rarely play during concerts. I plan on seeing them at least once or each time they tour, as long as they're still kicking. While I can pull something of value from all of Green Day's eras, there is something so visceral, fresh, and exciting about Dookie I just find intoxicating. It had been a little bit since I really immersed myself with the record's entire layout, but those urges to head nod, fist bump, air drum, and lip sync all flooded out of me again like Niagara Falls during preparation for this episode. I had a blast getting ready for this recording. I noticed underappreciated details and was left in awe amid the famous components of this album. It was the best research project I've ever conducted. Dookie premiered on February 1st, 1994, under Warner Brothers' Reprise Records. At the time, it acted as a fresh way to introduce punk rock to a starving clientele who received some morsels of the genre through other artists. This record would also serve as a significant influence for the upcoming rendition of rock bands. And for fans searching for a new added punch from the alternative neighborhood, well, Green Day was more than happy to supply the fist. In 1776, we had the Declaration of Independence. In 1994, we had the declaration of apathy. Green Day's Dookie starts off with a track titled Burnout, whose opening line belts out, "I declare I don't care no more." The opening track makes it clear where Green Day stands on things. It's hard to be more blunt when kickstarting your major label debut. Armstrong's sloppy, more high-pitched whine conveys the message. He has a great tempo and knows when to add certain emphasis into words and vowels. And I love the second part of the chorus, personally. "I stepped in line to walk amongst the dead." Huge part of 90s youth culture. Not wanting to fall into the trap of corporatization. You want to make sure you're staying true to yourself. You're valuing your ethics above all else. And that was not just seen in the music of the time. You could see that in the art, literature, and movies of the decade. And it's really significant that Green Day mentions this during their first song on a Warner Brothers punk album. Armstrong is signaling he would not compromise just because the band got signed to a big deal. More on the idea of selling out later, as that theme is going to be connected to this record until the end of time. So musically, Cool's drumming is unbelievably dynamic on this number. He uses 4 different fills during the instrumental, which is impressive, as considering he's a punk drummer. You think of those guys as trying to just be able to keep a fast pace and stay on time with the band, right? But on this record, he is a machine. He's so effective throughout this record by adding unique fills and not just trying to stay on a fast beat. That is important for other punk drummers on other records to make sure that they're staying really, really fast throughout, but they're not necessarily adding a lot of complex drumming capabilities. Cool is absolutely killing it throughout the entire record, and it's made sure that everybody knows that right from the start. Without his incredible touch, feel, talent, and timing, this record does not work. And honestly, neither does Green Day. Moving over to Having a Blast. You get a really gripping bass line from Dirt on the intro of this one. And then Armstrong brings some real intensity to the song, both lyrically and vocally. He is snapping, and is showing he does not care. He sounds so apathetic during this performance regarding his reality in life. He is not only over those people, he's over his entire living situation. And Armstrong often bears his self-destructive side in his writing, and to me it always comes off very real and very compelling. And again, touching on themes of not caring. Massive part of connecting this record into modern culture is understanding how important that theme and big of a part that was of culture when Armstrong first put pen to paper for this record. Going back to music here, the space played with here is just so effective by all 3 guys on this number and throughout the entire record. All 3 guys are being able to show off their talents musically throughout this record. Whereas you think of punk groups and certain classic albums, you don't necessarily think of all guys showing off their entire capable abilities musically. You'd think of maybe punchy chorus, a singer was showing some aggression, hard power chords, drummer keeping time, and that's it. That's the 2.5-minute track, and you hear that about 10 times on an album. But during this record, you really hear all 3 guys have their own spotlight to show off at times how important their contributions were to this record, especially considering that Armstrong is the figurehead of this band. It's his story that he's singing, and he's the lead guitarist. But Cool and Dirt are not exactly just side pieces for this entire album and for Green Day's success. You could really hear at certain songs how important, and maybe even the most important part of a song, that Cool is, Dirt is, and other times, of course, Armstrong is the one carrying the torch. And especially on this number, Dirt's energy is really driving the track. At the start, he's the one who establishes the song's rhythm with that incredibly punchy bass. And oftentimes, you can pick up his most potent contributions early on in a song when you're first getting established. Because again, oftentimes when you're involved with rock bands, the bassist is the one who gets ignored. You're going to obviously hear the drums the whole time, and the person singing and playing the guitar is going to shine through as well. The bassist can oftentimes get lost in that wave of music. But on this record, there are many times when you can clearly hear how important Dirt's contributions are to the track. Really effective in this one of setting the tone. And I love how the entire set of instruments all pick up and pace towards the end of this effort. Awesome, awesome way to start off with these 2 back-to-back songs. Off to Chump. Now this one is a musical sucker punch. Such a gnarly opening combo from a musical intro and the first line that reads out, I don't know you, but I think I hate you. Such a phenomenal force throughout this song. Love when Armstrong gets angry, especially on this track. He's basically closing in on resentful. Even if admittedly, his anger might be misplaced. He has some real snarl spewing from his mouth on this one. Some of his best writing comes from self-loathing. Armstrong is not exactly writing about sunshine and rainbows throughout much of Green Day's catalog, but especially on this album. This song has a terrific punk energy to it. It's manic at times, yet very well controlled and paced at others. And after the second full-throated admittance that maybe I'm just dumb, the listeners are treated to a pristine instrumental section. A slick bass lullabies you in, then the beat of the drums ever so slightly start increasing. And then you get to the climax, a nasty collision of all three instruments. And then the song again plays with your expectations, slows down a little bit. And we get a pounding drum sequence that's very similar to the George of the Jungle intro. Underrated aspect, again, shining through of this record. These guys were able to show off their instrumental play without having to worry about Armstrong singing the entire record. Which, again, you don't always associate with alternative and punk bands of being able to really dominate this listener for 2 minutes, minute and a half, without any singing involved. These guys were all locked in on their instruments for this record. I love how the music builds to a fever pitch, going right into Green Day's first ever major label single. Now, Green Day as a group is very good at meshing the endings and intros of certain songs together, almost making them one long track. If I hear Brain Stew, I immediately want to hear Jaded afterwards. Extraordinary Girl bleeds perfectly into Letterbomb and American Idiot. And that's just a few examples. You can go through their discography. There's quite a number of those. And when you're listening to Dookie, either as the record or a playthrough without any timestamps, you can't really tell when Chump ends and the next track begins. But Longview is for sure solidified when Dirt's iconic thumping slides in to say hello. Their first ever major label single, and it really shows who they are as a threesome. Before you get to the really memorable bass line that really sets the tone before sliding into the famous do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do. As Dirt has some really catchy bass lines on this album, that just might be his best one. His play really comes through, especially on the lead-in. Again, giving him space to operate and have the spotlight be shining on him for a change. And then you're treated to some unbelievable lines from Armstrong on this number. I locked the door to my own cell, and I lost the key. And then the music explodes into a raging punk effort. You get kind of that quiet, loud dynamic, right out of the Nirvana playbook, right? I adore how Armstrong pronounces paradise with some real attitude, right? I love when he uniquely emphasizes vowels in his singing. It happens a couple times in this number, especially when you get to the end. Some say quit or I'll go blind, but it's just a myth. And then he doesn't say myth. He just kind of throws out the letter A a bunch of times as the song winds down. Really effective, again, showing a sloppy vocal performance to convey the message of a punk record. And this song is ultimately about boredom, right? You're just not feeling into it. As many people can appreciate and understand and identify with, you're busy feeling something else. Teenagers forever can relate. And wrapping up with another brilliant line, when masturbation's lost its fun, you're fucking lonely. Man, what a lyric. And then Cool plays the listener's expectations again, just slightly with an extra twitch in the drumming on the final sequence as we go into the eruption at the end. Awesome number, and it makes a lot of sense that they were picking this one to lead off as their number one single. Off to Welcome to Paradise, one of the most compelling intros in Green Day's catalog. A heart-stopping guitar riff and ripping drums launch this number into the stratosphere. A very fascinating theme in the lyrics as well. Being on your own for the first time. You're living in maybe an old building, a sketchy area. You scared? Sure. But you're also proud that you're out here on your own. Armstrong sings, some call it slums, some call it nice. I want to take you through a wasteland I like to call my home. Using the different perspectives in this song is so effective to convey this message. This place may suck to you, but hey, at least it's mine. Armstrong is really digging deep for the vocals. His voice drips with sincerity, as it does throughout this entire record. Honestly, there's not many times where he's sarcastically singing lines. He really does feel like he's conveying songs and ideas that he truly believes in. As this song really touches on the reality for the band when they were touring and trying to support themselves on Lookout Records. And again, this song touches on another theme that Armstrong loves diving into, writing about streets, boulevards, roads. He goes back to that idea many times throughout Green Day's career. So a couple fun facts about this track. It was actually first put out on 1991's Kerplunk, which was the only song off Dookie that Green Day had released on an album before. Also, when the band was performing their infamous Woodstock 94 show, they actually started off with this song before the mud started pelting them afterwards. They knew they had a hit with this number. But those Warner Brothers checks were not exactly cash in Armstrong's bank when he first took pen to paper for this number. It's very real. And as the track goes on, he starts to feel a little bit better about his reality. He says, "For some strange reason, it's now feeling like my home, and I'm never gonna go." Now, musically, Dirt then melts your face off with a bass solo, and Cool teases the number with anticipation. Armstrong goes from at the start of the song saying, "Dear mother, can you hear me whining?" to now boasting, "Dear mother, can you hear me laughing?" All it took was 6 months to flip perspectives. Now, this is one of the Green Day songs that I fell in love with personally. I couldn't get enough of it when I was first introduced to this, especially considering the incredible guitar intro. Loved it. I actually wrote a paper about this song in college one time. I'll touch on more on that a little bit later on. Moving on over to Pulling Teeth. Such a terrific build-up and climax just from the opening alone on this number. Now, the song was inspired by Dirt injuring himself during a, you'll never guess, pillow fight with his then-girlfriend. So the title came to them from a song off Metallica's Kill 'Em All, which was titled Anesthesia, Pulling Teeth. And Dirt's girlfriend at the time was named Anastasia. So that's where they got the title for it. And it's kind of funny that such a dumb incident and inside joke could inspire a really touching song. So this track is sung from the perspective of a guy getting abused by his significant other. Even though the story may be a goof, Armstrong's performance sure as hell isn't. He's really able to tap into the headspace of this character. His vocals are soaked in sincerity. He somehow sounds scared, in love, and nonchalant all at the same time. No easy feat. "She takes good care of me," he says. "Just keep saying my love is true." The guitar play is so emotive and conveys such melancholy on this number. The vocals mesh so seamlessly with the music. They are complementing each other the entire time. They really do fit in together hand to hand, especially on the couple instances that they peak together in harmony. The ending is just so gripping, satisfying. Personally, I just can't get over how much I adore this song. I was obsessed when I was first introduced to it. And it will always be a great example that I pull when showing other people underappreciated Green Day songs. It literally has an award on this show for a reason, right? Now, we're off to one of the most legendary opening lines in rock history. Courtesy of Basket Case, Armstrong sets up this number by asking, "Do you have the time to listen to me whine about nothing and everything all at once?" If I could have one lyric as the tagline for this show, it would definitely be that one. The downstroking power chords add to the song's fervor. It's so intense, yet bright and fun. And then you're treated to a wicked avalanche of drums and a heavy bass play that definitely cranked this number up to 11. Trey is surreal on this track. A few key plunks from Dirt add to the song's greatness as well. So noteworthy how Armstrong is bending some societal norms and lyrics of this one. So at one point he's talking to a therapist who he identifies as a woman, and she basically tells him straight up, "Yeah, you're feeling bummed out because you haven't gotten laid recently." And then we jump over to, "I went to a whore. He said my life's a bore. So quit my whining because it's bringing her down." Calling a man a whore was quite the move in the mid-90s, Mr. Armstrong. And also what's interesting, was he telling that was Armstrong being told that he was going to blow it with this girl? Or was Armstrong mixing up the characters because he's just so cracked up? Because on a demo early on, the line was, "She said my life's a bore." So interesting change for the studio effort. The vocals are so impassioned. You could tell that Armstrong is being really, really passionate during this number. Because if you know the story, this was actually written because Armstrong himself, as a kid, struggled from panic attacks. How impressive that he was able to channel in such a frustrating part of his life and create a really, really iconic song that is one of the most important and memorable in his band's discography. Feather in your cap for sure on that one. I love the instrumental play. It really adds some pop to this number as well. The play is so fervent. Right up into the last chord is cranked. Gotta talk about the music video. It's an all-timer. So it was originally shot in black and white, and then color was added later on. So it makes it for a very unique viewing experience. The colors are very saturated. And you get an oblige to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, that famous Jack Nicholson movie, when dirt breaks the window towards the end. I also love when Armstrong is looking around. His eyes are darting everywhere, looking completely zooted as the colorful screen clashes. And as the song is closing off, the gates close in on them, keeping them in the insane asylum. Honestly, this is one of my all-time favorite songs in any genre. Could be number one on a certain day when asked. I nicknamed my Bose speakers Basket Case, one of the tracks I just have in so many playlists. It's definitely one of the songs that when I'm going on a YouTube music video binge, I gotta cue this number up. It's what I want an alternative rock song to be. And it's one of the songs that I cannot wait to share with my future wife and kids just to show them a piece of art that really speaks to me on an emotional level. Love this number. Can't get enough of it. Next up on Dookie is She. You get a really funky bass line that ignites this track. A little bit of almost a Western twang to it. As a kid, I kind of connected it to Aerosmith's Sweet Emotion opening, as it's really the only times that I've heard a bass sound like that. Just incredible lyrics from Armstrong. She screams in silence. One of my favorite things about his writing is he is a master at dichotomy, as screams literally cannot by nature be in silence, but he's using that as a metaphor for when either you're not having your problems heard, or maybe it's a friend, a loved one, that are complaining and they're crying out to a void and no one's responding. What a brilliant idea to put in a song. And his vocal performance during this number shows off his range as well, because he's really starting off in a very subdued, intimate singing performance, and then by the end, he is screaming like bloody murder to convey. And also, it's very interesting that he can use those ideas of dichotomy throughout his entire career. That's a theme that he would definitely go back and forth on songs such as Minority, Forever Now. That type of symbolism he really includes in his writing, and it's an awesome part of Green Day's entire musical journey. And it's great to hear that type of writing on a supposedly snotty punk record. And he goes into these ideas by using them as physical objects or events. It's so impressive how he quotes, "A sullen riot penetrating through her mind, to smash the silence with the brick of self-control. Are you feeling like a social tool without a use?" Dynamic literary excellence all the way through on this number, especially coming from someone without a high school degree. Now, it made sense he stepped up his writing game for this song, as Armstrong got inspired to write this number after a girl that he was interested in. She showed him a poem that mentioned smashing silence with the brick of self-control, and a light bulb popped off in his head. Poetry, an awesome way to get the creative punk juices flowing. And on the last instrumental portion, unbelievable drive. It's punctured by Armstrong's battle cry, and it's one of the most satisfying musical breaks in the entire record. Incredible. You could feel the tenacity just catching on fire during the studio recording. Off to Sassafras Roots. Love the full, well-balanced musical lead-in, especially with the drumsticks tapping it into cue. Now, the song is repetitive. I can understand why certain people listening to this record wouldn't identify with it, but I think actually it makes the number more convincing, and I'm a big fan of it. This song's about hanging out with someone. From Armstrong's perspective, probably a girl, with nothing really going on in life, so you might as well have a partner for the company, right? A song that could really resonate with someone around the age of 12 to about 24. As any younger than that, your parents aren't going to allow you just to roam the neighborhood without anything to do, especially in today's world. That's not happening. And then after you through that age bracket, when you get to your mid-20s, you're out of college, you probably aren't in the position to waste a lot of time in your life. This song also pits on the era-defining zeitgeist that was really massive in the 90s. As teenagers, before cell phones, social media, the internet, they were bored all the time. Creativity, fun, adventure, mistakes, memories came out of those sessions, right? Now, unfortunately, we kind of have the opposite problem in society. There's too much stimulation and pressure that these kids are not allowed or encouraged to waste time. They're too busy trying to get an internship before they even graduate high school. I adore also Armstrong's vocals on this number, especially during the chorus. He's so sincere about wanting to waste time with this person. He's not being sarcastic. He even asked permission to waste time with them at one point. And I love how he holds the line on "to" during the choruses. It's one of my favorites during the entire record, and the line delivery on this song really helps drive home that point. This track often gets you hooked in a very mundane-themed trance. Very effective number. Now, speaking of effective tracks, moving over to When I Come Around. You get a really delicate guitar play and drumming on the intro, and then a deep bass gets established as well. Again, all three guys showing just how important they were to the band's sound. And then Armstrong delivers some real bittersweet lyrics. He makes it clear he will be around when or if this girl wants him. But despite having a connection to each other, he puts it best. You can't go forcing something if it's just not right. How true. You get real emotive guitar tone on this one. It's unique for the album. That only really happens on a handful of times. The effective solo also really ties this track together. You get an amazing swing element. As the music cascades along, especially if you're listening to it in headphones, a wave of sound just washes over you. Green Day has always been very elite at bringing emotion out of their albums. It's very rare for a record of theirs to not include at least one touching tune. The only example I could really think of is how on Insomniac, how Green Day followed up Dookie. There's not an acoustic chord to be found on that track. But that record was in response to the pressure and the success that Green Day was facing and then also dealt with after Dookie, so it made sense that they were kind of in a different headspace as they would be for other parts of their career. But When I Come Around is one of their most popular songs in their entire catalog. And for a punk band, they are very good at cultivating a female audience, right? They're very willing to be vulnerable, and it is one of their most enduring qualities as a group. Now, I will say, I do have emotional songs of theirs ranked a little bit higher, personally. I prefer Good Riddance, Waiting, Wake Me Up When September Ends. I know some people just go absolutely nuts for this number, and it would be one of their favorite songs if they love the band, and even for some people who don't know much about Green Day, they might be able to point to this song and say that they actually love that one as well. To me, it just doesn't quite hit me home in the same way as it does for other Green Day fans. But I also always enjoy sharing those little intricate details, because if I was talking to you right now, I'd be very curious to know, where would you rank When I Come Around in relation to other songs on this record? And also, where would you put it in Green Day's catalog when looking at other emotive tracks? I'm endlessly fascinated with that conversation topic. Now, speaking of vulnerability, the next song on Dookie is titled Coming Clean. And this is a song about opening up to your parents about your own sexuality. But it's fascinating how Armstrong turns that topic on its head. He is not singing this from an ashamed perspective. He's not embarrassed. He's depicting this as a masculine, even brave act. As he puts it, I found out what it takes to be a man. You're not being afraid to show who you are, even if it means making your loved ones uncomfortable. So Armstrong thought that message was very important, and not just in his songs, but in how the band conducted itself. So on Green Day's first big tour in the summer of '94, they invited along Pansy Division. They are a San Francisco band who would write and play very blunt songs about homosexuality. And Pansy Division were the band that Green Day chose to open for them on their initial headlining tour. Big deal. One promoter in Fairfax, Virginia, did not want Pansy Division playing one night. And Green Day simply said, if they don't play, we don't play. And having a group like Pansy Division opening for your first headlining tour took massive balls in 1994. America's view on homosexuality was a lot different back then, clearly, than in today's standards. Also, in modern times, this decision to perform with a band like that would not be considered as big of a deal. And if for some reason it became a big story, people on social media would come out and support them. So regardless of your personal views, you got to respect the hell out of a group by standing by their principles. Where if an artist did that today, honestly, some would question the motives and sincerity behind the maneuver. Were they doing it to support a cause they championed? Or were they interested in social media likes and trying to gain buzz? Green Day appeared genuine and just wanted everyone along for the ride. They weren't trying to get brownie points with this decision. They wanted to send a message. And coming clean is a clever, effective way to convey that message on this record. Moving over to Iminis Sleepus. Now, before we get into things that I do know about this song, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that 100% correctly, and I definitely don't know what the title actually means. But what I do know is you get a real feral opening instrumental section on this track. One of the most pure punk songs on the entire album. The drumming, guitar, and bass all have real tenacity behind it. This song is about running into an old friend that you hadn't seen in a while, and the awkwardness that can arise from doing so. What do you talk about? Is this person still remotely like what they were in high school? Because you're not really talking to that person when you're talking to them. You're talking to who that person used to be. And Armstrong sums that situation up perfectly. And now I'm sick, and I want to go home. A real phenomenal up-tempo beat from Cool in this number. This is a really just fun song to take in at the end of an album, especially when paired with the next number, which is an equally aggressive punk tune titled In the End. I get the biggest kick out of the drumstick taps to count the song in. All it's missing is Dee Ramone shouting out, 1, 2, 3, 4. Such a great pairing of punk excellence on the back of Iminis Sleepus. Armstrong's, again, overemphasizing certain vowels, and it's so effective in his tone. It's a staple of his singing early on in his catalog, which I just find endlessly compelling. Love the sloppy vocals. They just fit so well in early Green Day songs. Then the mini solo works you right up into a frenzy. Cool crescendos that with a gnarly drumming sequence. So the different sounds are basically just colliding into each other on this effort. The noises are coming from all over. It makes for a very disorienting listening experience, as if you have your head caught in a wasp's nest. It's so terrific and satisfying, but it is definitely manic nonetheless. Great punk rock doubleheader on the back album. Absolutely. So now we're going to the last real track on Dookie before we get to the bonus. FOD. I'll get to what that stands for in a second. It starts off with Armstrong strumming the cheapest sounding guitar you have ever heard. It almost sounds like he's using a child's toy for this song. The track is fascinating. Lyrically, Armstrong is about to move on from this place and person. Let's nuke the bridge we've torched 2,000 times before. As a last hurrah. He's feeling nostalgic, knowing it will never be the same. When it's all said and done, it's real and it's been fun. But was it all real fun? One of the best segments on this record. Yeah, sure, I've known you forever. But do I even like you and enjoy being around you? Or did we just hang out because of proximity? And then the most jarring part of the album, lyrically and musically, comes up. An atom bomb of punk blows out your eardrums, and you know exactly what FOD stands for when Armstrong shouts out, I'm telling you to fuck off and die. It is unclear if this person recently scorned Armstrong to push him over the top for this reaction, or if he's always kind of felt this way and just erupted one day. Either or. The story and music are shocking, especially when you listen to this on the first time. Now, ultimately, I wonder if this song would be more effective if this was 100% acoustic, as Armstrong was interested in writing those types of songs at this point of his career. He already penned Good Riddance, and I ultimately just am wondering if this song would be able to show that Green Day was able to show their entire acoustic-centric parts in a rock and punk record to end off. That would have been a real cool maneuver, but ultimately they decided to mix it up. But also, you think, would this song have been even better if it was just punk all the way through? I wouldn't have batted an eye if it was power chords the entire time either. Now, this song is ultimately, in my mind, paired up with Van Halen's Ice Cream Man, as that song also starts off acoustic and ends electric. And I much prefer the electric portion of that number. And it just kind of got me thinking, if every time I heard an acoustic song at the start then bleed into a plugged-in set, Would I always find myself enjoying one side of the song more than the other? I don't know. But what I do know is ultimately, FOD is a fascinating way to end this record. Until you get to the little bonus track at the end. A quick number by Cool. And this is a fine line between unsettling and innocent. So 2 interesting things to choose from that I want to dive into on this song. This could have been the gateway for Cool's songwriting for the band, as he did come up with Rock and Roll Girlfriend on American Idiot's Homecoming. And I am eternally grateful for that. I live for that portion. Also, Billie Eilish has said this is her favorite Green Day song, along with Jesus of Suburbia. I wonder how many people you would have to pull who identify as Green Day fans to come to another person saying that those are their 2 favorite tracks. She's got to be the only person in the world who thinks that. It is ultimately a fun, whimsical bonus track that shows off that Green Day was not afraid to be silly jackasses. Off to the categories. Crank it up to 11. In honor of Spinal Tap, the best portion on a record. What makes you want to turn up the volume, ignore everything else in the world, and just appreciate the music. I decided to go with the start of Basket Case. That track could win for best line, best opening, best portion, so that's why I put it in this spot. Having Armstrong downstroking to perfection in sync with sprouting out, "Do you have the time to listen to me whine about nothing and everything all at once" is about as good as alternative music can get. And then Cool and Dirt join in during the "Sometimes I Give Myself the Creeps" segment, and it's just otherworldly. It is one of the definitive songs to explain 90s rock and help shape the punk genre as we know it to this very day. Going over to Reshuffling History. Breaking down the album's layout and just seeing if it could have been improved in any way, with either changing up the starter, the closer, or any other segment in between. Overall, I really do appreciate how you can get different sense of what Green Day is as a band during this record. It's not all punk and it's not all pop. It's a really, really good balance. I love how it starts off with Burnout. Great decision, especially with the opening line. FOD is a very interesting closer. So when I listen to this group, like funneling them into 4 different categories, right? I like pairing up the first 3 songs, Longview going into Basket Case, She to When I Come Around, and then the last 4 tracks plus the bonus. But ultimately, this record is why I talk about this category each time on this program. My question is, would Dookie have been better if Longview went right into Welcome to Paradise, who then went right into Basket Case? You could even then plug in She and then When I Come Around, so you get 5 of the 20 biggest songs in Green Day's catalog all in a row on an album. Now, they did not know for sure which tracks on this record would become certified concert staples when they put it on in a compilation in 1994. When Green Day was first actually going on tour for Dookie, they had to decide which songs they were going to play each night guaranteed. And they were thinking Basket Case they thought was kind of a difficult track to perform. But they eventually caught wind of how popular it really was. And so they acquiesced, and it has been a live staple ever since. And thank God for that, because it's amazing to hear in person. So it can be hard to predict which songs will take on a life of their own off an album. But now with hindsight in our favor, would Dookie be more poignant if those 5 songs were played on the record in a row? I actually listened to that a few different times to try to get a feel for it, and I really did appreciate how the flow went from hit after hit after hit when I changed up the shuffling a little bit. It's still an amazing way to hear and consume this record. Also, I think the other tracks in between and after would have gotten actually more appreciation throughout the years. How many times do you think Pulling Teeth and Sassafras Roots were skipped over in order to listen to those 5 numbers all in a row? Now I know, I'm probably overthinking and analyzing the hell out of this. But that's a huge thing for the show. And I love these 2 songs that get skipped over all the time and underappreciated, and this time they jumped out during my prep. I think it would have been beneficial to either put those 5 songs in a row in slots 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 on the record, or spreading them out a little bit. Clumping them together but not all in a row, I think hurts the record's layout slightly. It's still very nice to listen to how they placed it, but I think that one change could have gone a long way. Reprogramming history, and this is where I go through and just show which songs have held up the best throughout time and which songs were huge in real time. So like I said, it didn't take long for those 5 songs to catch on. Longview, Welcome to Paradise, Basket Case, She, and When I Come Around are massive tracks. They were then, and they still are today. rock radio hits of alternative, and now, it's been 30 years, classic rock stations, which is crazy. They are songs that people who don't know much about Green Day might have heard of. They might know the chorus. They could know the song title, one of the riffs. Always you're hearing them in Green Day concerts till the end of time. Even during the infamous 2012 iHeart radio show, when Armstrong freaked out on stage for having their time cut short, they played Longview and were already playing Basket Case when he erupted. They performed partly 7 songs, 2 of which were from that list of 5. And honestly, they probably could have played more, but they performed 2 tracks from a record they were promoting at the time. So even if they're just on for a few minutes for a performance on either a radio station, TV show, you're almost guaranteed to hear one of those Green Day songs, which makes sense. And ultimately, I would think Basket Case, to me, best defines this record. The music, lyrics, and music video perfectly encapsulates this era of the band. That is the song I would share with someone to quickly explain to them what Green Day is all about, especially from this part of their career. I think the entire album, honestly, is elite. The other 9 tracks on here are all dearly underappreciated. But after spending ample time with this record in preparation for this episode, Pulling Teeth and Sassafras Roots were the ones that really stuck to my ribs this time around. I would have enjoyed seeing those 2 songs receive more pub throughout the years. Now, speaking of, we're off to the awards. The Pulling Teeth Award, underrated, forgotten, overlooked track. In honor of a song that's actually off this record. For the first time we're doing this. Winner, of course, Pulling Teeth has to win its own award. I cherish this number. Listening to this album a lot, I never got tired of this track. And again, it's wedged in between 2 of the ones that I appreciate more than almost any other songs in my entire history of consuming music. Welcome to Paradise and Basket Case. I was so amped to hear this number every single time. Armstrong's voice is full of longing and sincerity. So even if the song was written in jest, it's still beautiful. I hope this podcast turns at least one person on to this brilliant number. Next up, This Ain't Havana, song that blew you away the most recent or first time you heard this record. This time around, it was definitely Sassafras Roots. I found myself just smiling endlessly and soaking in this number every time I heard it. I especially enjoyed the sweet way Armstrong asks, "May I waste your time too?" This album is much more than just a few alt radio hits. And both of these songs are endlessly underappreciated, and I hope that people listening to this show can grasp that going forward. Next up, the Highway to Hell Award, Best Musical Intro, in honor of that incredible riff Angus Young created on the last record with Bon Scott. Winner, Welcome to Paradise. So in college, I was taking an English class, and we were assigned to write a paper analyzing a song. And I'm sure you'd be stunned to learn that, of course, I'd write about a Green Day song, and it was Welcome to Paradise. Unfortunately, I don't think I have a copy of that essay saved, but I do remember including something to the extent of this song's introduction bursts out, quote, like an orgasm of anxiety. And I remember feeling pretty cool about writing orgasm in a college paper and having it actually fit the assignment. And that theme rings true all these years later. The intro on Welcome to Paradise is so ferocious. The melody leaves teeth marks behind. It's hard not to headbang along when this number gets queued up. The Lithium Award, in honor of Nirvana's single from the Nevermind record, that starts off with, "I'm so happy because today I found my friends. They're in my head." So I already acknowledged, Basket Case could claim basically all these awards. But I really do think it an unbelievable start off to the record, and one of the songs is Burnout's I Declare I Don't Care No More, and that's the winner for this one. Love the dichotomy, as declaring something almost always means announcing that you care deeply about something, not that you don't care. It's such an effective lead-off line for Armstrong to spew out as the first sentence on the band's major label debut. The Eruption Award. Shout out to Eddie Van Halen for that incredible solo he concocted on Van Halen's first record. Winner. I decided to go with She. There were actually a few different songs that I could rock with this award, which is interesting considering, again, punk record. You don't always think of thrashing solos, but this record is honestly chock full of awesome instrumental portions. But with She, the lyrics and intro get all the love, but that crazy high-intensity solo from the lads after Armstrong screams is just amazing. They all seem on the verge of just breaking their instruments. From either just shredding too damn hard, or with the tension in the air, it feels like they're going to pull a Paul Simon and just smash their instruments right then and there. Tattoo or t-shirt. What's something that I could temporarily put on my body in honor of this record, or maybe even permanently. And this leaves me no short of options. The album cover has some amazing images, quotes throughout would make for great tattoos. The artwork adjacent that's online, really talented people have put together some really cool collages, considering that there's unbelievable cartoons connected to this record as well that you can find in t-shirts. Awesome stuff. I owned a basket case and pulling teeth t-shirt at one point in my life. One of the all-time great record covers, which I guess makes up for the fact that it's literally titled Dookie. There's God on a cloud whistling, Ozzy standing ominously, a monkey wondering if he should throw his... You get the gist. I think the best portion of the record cover is the Bad Year Blimp. I think that would make for a hell of a t-shirt. I'd rock that. Nobody's perfect. Just going through and picking which song I ultimately don't seek out a lot, flat out don't like, or if I could just eliminate one song of this record, which one would I choose? And this is a hard decision for me. This is like deciding what flavor of ice cream to eliminate from my life, or picking the least attractive Victoria's Secret Angel. I will say I'm going with Having a Blast here. If only because I would sometimes skip over that song when listening to the CD in my truck when driving around to get to the Chump Longview region, as there wasn't really another song on the record that I would consistently just not want to hear as much as the other ones. They were all pretty equal. Now again, I do like this song a lot. I love and appreciate it. It's just not one that I go out of my way to really put on different playlists or on YouTube. Almost Famous. So, in honor of that 2000 movie with Kate Hudson, this is basically my submission to Rolling Stone, showing why modern music fans should care about this band and record today. So this is titled Turning Glass Ceilings into Diamond Records. Dookie catapulted Green Day to the top of the rock genre. It became a seminal 90s musical artifact that has carried over into the 21st century. In 2004, Dookie achieved in 2024, so 30 years after it was released. In 2024, Dookie achieved double diamond status as one of only 13 records ever to move upwards of 20 million units in the United States. Led Zeppelin 4, Thriller, Back in Black, Rumors, and The Wall are some other ultimate albums forever solidified in history alongside Green Day's major label debut. Through their power chords, fingernail-biting lyrics, and extraordinary energy, Green Day guided a whole new generation down the riveting rabbit hole of punk rock. And that is where things got complicated. The punk aesthetic has always prided itself on rejecting corporate culture. Can you really be anti-establishment if you sell your albums on Reprise Records under the Warner Brothers umbrella? This type of music was designed for the underground, the outcasts, and the rejects. The extent of publicity was the back of the club. Both Dookie exploding into the radio formats, especially out in LA, listening to K-Rock, MTV, and into the homes of kids from all kinds of backgrounds. Punk was streamlining into the ears of mainstream consumers. The genre no longer belonged to a certain kind of person, and now belonged to everyone. Being fearful of who got their grimy hands on this sacred art form was the same idea Kurt Cobain was hitting on with In Bloom, where he showered contempt on those who did not understand the band's larger message, but still sung along with the chorus. And in the mid-90s, when the term sellout hit like a slur, some members of the punk community deemed the band the enemy for inking with the same label that had ties to Frank Sinatra and Kenny Rogers. Never mind the fact that the demand for Green Day's records outgrew Lookout's distribution ability, or the point that they spent years touring around in a van to play backyard parties to then crash on floors and couches. Let's ignore that they were not compromising their sound or ethics one iota when creating this album for Warner Brothers. God forbid a punk band received commercial and critical success at the same fucking time. Green Day made money and became famous from their talent in real time, so clearly they are evil. We didn't have the option to go back and to go to college, Dirnt explained in the documentary Green Day, The Early Years. We didn't have these opportunities or other drives for that matter. This is what we wanted to do, and this is what we were going to do. And I'll be damned if anyone's going to tell us anything different. Those bitching that Green Day crossed that line seem to be missing a vital point. The record label has nothing to do with the music. The Ramones were under Sire Records. Do you know what other artist was with that label? Madonna. Yes, the Ramones, who played over 2,200 concerts in their 22 years to support their career because they never hit it big with album sales. and helped establish the identity of American punk rock, were certainly corporate shills because they shared a label with the Queen of Pop. Hear how dumb that sounds? Elvis Costello beautifully broke down this misconception when interviewed for VH1's Ultimate Album's Dookie. It's what's on the record. It's not what label it is on. That's like getting a box of cornflakes and eating the cardboard. It's stupid. There's a much more punk rock idea of getting with a major record company and spending all their money than there is getting your friend to press up your records in his basement and spending all his mother's money and his own money that he borrowed. Which is exactly more revolutionary. I think it's bankrupting the major corporations myself. Green Day did not turn their back on the scene that assisted in spawning their careers. If anything, they helped breathe life into the genre. As mentioned earlier, Green Day chose Pansy Division to open for their first massive tour in the summer of '94. And if any promoter argued about having them perform, Green Day was prepared to sit out the show. In their first real time in the spotlight, the trio backed a group and stood with their principles, even when pressured with backlash. It's not supposed to be about having a hit single, Armstrong said in Green Day the early years. It's about people finding themselves for the first time, and they do it through music. Even after Dookie was printed on diamond vinyl, the trio had long memories regarding their sassafras roots. After Green Day moved up the music label, they made sure their original distributor kept the rights to their first 2 independent albums. That was really a very considerate thing to do, said Lookout Records' former president, Christopher Applegren. It really honored the spirit of the relationship we had with them. The group also adores paying respect to original punks who paved the way for them and everyone else, but never got their much-deserved recognition. When the Ramones were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2002, Green Day paid tribute to the iconic foursome by passionately performing Teenage Lobotomy, Rockaway Beach, and Blitzkrieg Bob. When the Stooges finally got their Hall of Fame call in 2010, Armstrong delivered a heartfelt speech to officially welcome them into the exclusive club. In the aftermath of Green Day dishing out Dookie on a major label, the punks of past, present, and future benefited. Dookie was an absolute explosion of popularity for everything associated with punk rock, pontificated Bad Religion's Brett Gurewitz. How many kids got turned on to the Ramones, The Clash, Iggy Pop, The Stooges, The Sex Pistols, Black Flag, The Dead Kennedys, and other great punk groups because they loved Basket Case and heard When I Come Around on the radio? Green Day are not, nor have they ever been, punk pariahs. If anything, they're champions of the genre. The Northern California three-piece also kick-started a chain reaction in the industry. Music executives became infatuated with bands like The Offspring, Rancid, Sum 41, Blink-182, Cage the Elephant, Rise Against, and others. These groups were then able to leave their own impression on the minds of teenagers for decades to come. For the rest of their career, Green Day would do just fine. They became one of the most prominent rock acts that flourished in a post-grunge world. They did an excellent job at expanding their sound while not compromising their DNA. They would bounce all around the alternative spectrum, producing quality music softer and harder than that on Dookie. In an era where rock was facing stiff competition, even losing ground to other genres in some respects, Green Day would keep the eternal torch aflame. Their high-octave line shows, on stadium-level tours decades into their career, ambitious records, and ability to preach the punk doctrine to virgin ears, such as through an inspired Broadway production, all contributed to them becoming God's favorite band. But even after all that, their most successful record remains their major label introduction. Dookie has become synonymous with 90s rock, crowded in the same regards as Nirvana's Nevermind and Metallica's The Black Album. Its massive hits can still be heard all over the radio, YouTube, and streaming platforms. But engulfing the entire record in one sitting will always endure as a powerful punk pilgrimage. Now, over 30 years removed from its initial release, Dookie remains a critical document for decoding an adolescent's id. Anxiety shivers in lockstep with brash opinions. Thoughts on worrying about the future simultaneously volley with counting down the days you can set your own schedule, and the never-ending dance between striving for individuality while also chasing acceptance from your peers remains nothing short of dire. Layer those messages from a sincere scream between riveting guitar, striking bass, and glorious drums, and you have a record that will always hit home for adolescents from any generation. And that does it for this episode of Don't Scratch the Vinyl. So just a few housekeeping items before I sign off. Please follow the show on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, at DSTV Pod. Facebook page is Don't Scratch the Vinyl Podcast. I have clips up on those channels, and we'll be adding additional content as long as I am producing the show. Next time up, I'll be breaking down No Doubt's Tragic Kingdom, the record that helped propel Gwen Stefani into household name status. Not only am I excited to be diving into another California classic, I'll be sharing a story that was one of the best moments of my entire life. Hint, it involves a massive hit off that record. That show will be recorded sometime in the next couple of weeks, which will be around the 30th anniversary of the record, October 10th. Thanks again for listening. I really appreciate it. Hopefully you get something out of this show if you were a longtime fan of Green Day or did not know much about them before listening. Share along with friends, family. Every little bit helps. I continue to grow and refine this program. I hope I did their story justice. No musical group means more to me. I have spent an extraordinary amount of time in my life listening to Billie Joe Armstrong whine about nothing and everything all at once. They are a huge reason I wanted to do this show, to talk about music and explain which bands, songs, and albums mean a lot to me. I had an absolute blast listening to this record many times, the demos, and other Green Day songs in preparation. I also really enjoyed consuming music videos, interviews, documentaries, and concerts. I'm very lucky that research for my show was centered around taking in content from my favorite band. Green Day has made my life infinitely better. I honestly could have been a different person if I gravitated towards another group as a young boy. It means the world to me that I was able to dedicate an episode of my show to them and one of their definitive records. Thanks again for hanging out and listening to me ramble about one of the best bands America has ever produced, and my all-time personal favorite. And remember this, please, above all else, if you take one thing from the show, remember, you rock, and don't let anyone ever tell you different.